Let's begin by talking about a little band you may have heard of called the Beatles. I was lucky enough to see 3 of the Beatles in person. Paul I saw in concert. I don't remember when it was. All I remember is that it was a very big venue and he was great, of course. I saw George in concert at the Forum in Los Angeles. This was when he launched his record label Dark Horse. Unfortunately, George lost his voice during the tour, so the music was great, but then he'd start to sing and it was pretty awful. Years later, I was at the Forum again to see Eric Clapton perform, and George came out in the middle and performed about 3 songs with Eric Clapton, and he sounded great then. George unfortunately passed away in 2001. Ringo is a different story. I was at a small bookstore on the Sunset Strip. It's still there, actually, called Book Soup. And Timothy Leary was doing a book signing of his latest book. So we're all kind of huddled in one corner of the bookstore. Not many people there, maybe about 20 or so, to see Timothy Leary. And 2 guys kind of nudged their way to the front to stand next to Timothy Leary. And I look up, it's Ringo Starr, and it's Harry Nilsson, singer-songwriter, who passed away in 1994, so obviously this was before 1994. But that was really interesting to see them that close. He was maybe 10 feet away from me. That was pretty interesting. And then there's John. Just so sad when I think of John. I was just a year out of college. I decided to explore Europe on my own with my backpack, one of those deals. And my trip was done after 3 months. I was in London to get on a plane to go to New York to stop off, see some relatives before I came back to California. And right before I got on the plane, I heard John was killed, and I just could not believe it. This is December 1980. And I was just in a daze all the way home on that plane flight. And then when I got to New York City, I did go over to the Dakotas, the apartment building where John lived, and in front of which he was shot. So that was very moving. Big police presence, a lot of people standing outside, of course. And of course, I'm also old enough to remember seeing the Beatles in their first television appearance in the U.S. on the Ed Sullivan Show in 1964. And that brings us to today's episode. This is the Kazdoy Closet. I'm Kazdoy. That's my closet, full of all the stuff that I love. And today, Beatlemania lives again, or at least in this film. Let's check it out. Today's film is I Wanna Hold Your Hand from 1978. It's 99 minutes long in color. This is about 6 teenagers who are driving from New Jersey to New York City because they want to see the Beatles as they make their U.S. debut on the Ed Sullivan Show. Now, for all you young people out there, the Ed Sullivan Show was a variety show, very popular on Sunday nights. He was the host. He didn't have much personality, but he was the host of this thing, and they had every kind of act on there, from opera singers to ventriloquists to puppets to dog acts to rock and roll bands. And so the Beatles were going to make their U.S. debut on his show. Tens of millions of people tuned in for this thing. It's also a lot of debuts for the filmmakers themselves, because this is director Robert Zemeckis' first film, his first feature film. He was 26 years old at the time. He also co-wrote it with his partner. And he went on to direct some very popular, big-budget, high-profile films, such as Back to the Future, all 3 of them. He won a Best Oscar for Best Direct. He won a Best Director Oscar for Forrest Gump, which Mrs. Kazdoy Closet is not a fan of for some reason. And he made Castaway and many other big films. It's also the first feature film for actress Teresa Saldana. She plays one of the girls, and she is probably best known for playing Joe Pesci's wife in Raging Bull. And unfortunately, kind of morbidly, when I think of Teresa Saldana, I think of the fact that she was stabbed by a stalker. This guy approached her, I believe at her apartment, asked if she was Teresa Saldana. She said yes. He stabbed her 10 times. She was in the hospital for 3.5 months. Fortunately, she survived it, but he watched her films and he became obsessed with her. Wendy Jo Sperber is also in this film. Think of sort of a young Melissa McCarthy, that kind of vibe. Her first film is this one as well. And she's quite funny in this. I remember her from the TV series Bosom Buddies from 1980 to 1982 with Tom Hanks and Peter Scolari. And Wendy Jo Sperber, her character was in love with Peter Scolari. Nancy Allen is in this. She's kind of like the veteran of all these people because she's been in several films before this one. This is her fourth film, actually. She was, for a while, married to director Brian De Palma and made some fantastic films with him, like Dressed to Kill and Blowout and Carrie, which I believe came out right before this one did. And she also appeared in RoboCop. Her last appearance was in an episode of Law and Order SVU in 1999. She doesn't perform anymore for some reason. She is in one of the extras on here, a current extra, and she looks fantastic. I can't tell if there's any plastic surgery or anything. I can't really tell anything like that unless it's obvious. But she looks just great. Credit should also go to the location people because I was convinced this was shot in New York City. Turns out it wasn't. It was shot in LA using backlots of studios and various locations. Also, credit should go to the costumes and makeup people for the Beatle haircuts and the clothing and the girls' clothing and hairdos and all that kind of stuff. I Want to Hold Your Hand is really a very broad madcap physical comedy. You see some influences of the Three Stooges, the Marx Brothers. One of the characters reminds me a lot of Jerry Lewis, especially his character of the kid that he would use when he was with Dean Martin. I prefer Jerry Lewis's stuff after Dean Martin, but very reminiscent of that. Not all the way through, but you see little influences of that kind of comedy in this. The story revolves mainly around four girls and takes place in one night. Each one is obsessed to various degrees with the Beatles. Once they arrive in New York City, we follow each girl on their own separate journey, trying to either meet the Beatles or get tickets to the Ed Sullivan Show, or both. One girl, is kind of funny, is more into protest music, and she's always complaining how Bob Dylan and Joan Baez, that's the real music that's important nowadays, not the Beatles. And this guy she hangs out with is more of an Elvis fan. He's got the black leather jacket, and he's got his hair slicked back, and he's complaining about the Beatles, that their hair makes them look like girls, and they're just in the U.S. to steal American girls away and take them back to England with them. And so it has a very similar structure to American Graffiti, which I think is a far better film. That's from 1973, so 5 years before this one. Beatlemania is portrayed pretty well in this. You have a lot of shots of crowds of girls screaming and yelling and holding up signs. We love you, George. We love you, Paul, and all this stuff. Welcome to USA and all kinds of stuff. Lots of chasing going on. Guards and cops chasing kids down the street, chasing kids to the hotel lobbies. They're trying to break in. So a lot of that chasing physical comedy going on back and forth. It's a farce, really. You see some Beatle items for sale. Some are really ridiculous. Like here's a piece of carpeting that George once stepped on. So some of those show up. It's kind of funny. Murray the K, the famous New York DJ, he appears as himself in this film. Some people said he was the fifth Beatle, but they also called Billy Preston the fifth Beatle. They also called George Martin the fifth Beatle. So I guess there's a lot of fifth Beatles out there. But Murray the K is in here to interview some of the girls waiting for the Beatles. And he's also, you hear him hosting a radio show. He's giving tickets away to the Ed Sullivan Show. If the listeners can answer a trivia question. So do we actually see the Beatles in this film? Well, yes and no. I'm not going to say how, but it's very clever the way they deal with that in several different ways. Do the girls get to see the Beatles? I'm not going to give that away either. You're going to have to find out on your own. And in the end, I'm going to give this one a rating of 4 guitars out of 5. It's affectionate, nostalgic, coming of age. The girls learn life lessons. The boys do too, actually. And it's really a must if you're a Beatles fan to check this one out. So what's on this disc? This is a Criterion disc. I like how they made the disc look like a Capitol Records single, even though Capitol was not the first label to have them in the United States because some people were reluctant to take a chance on the Beatles. There's a booklet, which is actually quite good, but unfortunately it's one of those ones I don't like where it folds out like this instead of like a book. But the writing in it is good. There is an audio commentary from 2004 that I did not listen to. There is a conversation with Zemeckis, Bob Gale, his co-writer, and Steven Spielberg, who was the executive producer of this and kind of a mentor to Zemeckis. That's from 2018. It's about 40 minutes long, and it's a lot of fun. They obviously are friends, and the conversation flows. They reminisce about the making of the film, and so it's a fun to watch rather. There's a new interview with Nancy Allen and Mark McClure, who's one of the boys in the film. That was okay. That's about 20 minutes long, and there's 2 early short films by Robert Zemeckis, I think when he was at UCLA, and those are the ones that got the attention of Spielberg. I watched one of them. They're very short. They're like less than 10 minutes long, and the quality's not very good, so not much to say about those. So where can you see I Want to Hold Your Hand? You can rent it. You can buy this one. You can buy it on DVD also. And you might want to check your local library. They might have it there, your public library. So feel free to leave a comment or suggestion down below here. I would like to thank, maybe you've seen the Beatles in concert yourself or some other way. I would like to thank the following people who left comments since our last episode. Michael, Tina, Diod, Ma Orlu, Greg 1951. Thank you so much. Leave a thumbs up. Don't leave a thumbs down. Subscribe would be great. Share this with your friends and neighbors. I can't believe we're so close to our next goal of 575 subscribers. And that's just thanks to you. And I have several new subscribers since our last episode. Let me go through them fast. Gary, Luna23, Michael's Gaming Lair Enterprises. Sounds like a plug, right? Misung, Ma Orlu again. Duffman for Prez. And Greg 1951 Media Channel. Thank you so much for subscribing. Subscribing is free. Also free is Letterboxd. That's an app you can get. And we're there under the Kazdoy closet. There's a link below in the notes to that particular site and our presence there. And that's where we post short written reviews of other things we're watching that we don't talk about on this channel. We have a new follower, and that is Still Using Film. I love that. That's his name. He's now following us on Letterboxd. I posted 3 new brief reviews, written reviews. One for Talk to Me, the hot new horror film. Barbie, the other hot new horror film. And Superhost, a very good horror film that I saw on Shudder. So, thank you so much for watching. Hope you like this one, and I will see you next time.